Hello everybody, my name is Kara, and today I'm here with some fairy tale retelling and other retelling recommendations for the Retellathon. I will link my announcement video that has all of the information about the dates and the co-hosts and everything you want to know for the readathon in the description. I have quite a few recommendations here because obviously I love retellings. I have read a lot of ones that I would recommend, so I'm going to try and keep it as brief as possible for each book. So starting out with just the general kind of retellings, so these are not for a particular challenge, but depending on which fairy tale they retell, you can maybe use it for reading a retelling that's your favorite, or if you just want to get into reading more retellings. So the first one I have is The Castle Behind Thorns by Mary Haskell. This is a retelling of Sleeping Beauty. Once you get into kind of the main plot and figuring out the mystery of this kind of enchanted or cursed castle, it's impossible to put this book down. At least it was for me. The main female character is one of my favorite protagonists ever. I really enjoy her. This book also has an amazing friendship in it between the two central characters. Next is The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale. This is a retelling of The Goose Girl, and this book is really beautifully written. I think Shannon Hale is amazing at world building and at really making you get a sense for the place where you are and kind of the different cultures that interact in each of her stories. And we follow this princess who, through a combination of events, ends up in a faraway kingdom and has to kind of take up the disguise as the Goose Girl. And we kind of follow her through her adventures as she meets other characters and makes allies. Next is Fire and Hemlock by Diana Wynne Jones. This is a retelling of Tam Lin, kind of a classic ballad or story that I think is Scottish. And this is such a strange and magical book. If you've read Diana Wynne Jones, you know that there's just this very particular atmosphere to her stories, and this one is no exception. Polly is such an interesting main character. I wouldn't call her an unlikable protagonist, but she's definitely like frustrating and wonderful in the best way possible. It's got some very divisive elements, like the love story in this book is, I could see it being upsetting or problematic for a lot of people, and I honestly still don't really know how I feel about it. And this has some great kind of dark fairy tale or dark fairy kind of folklore or mythology that is also interwoven with the modern world. Next, I have kind of a classic retelling, and that is Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. This is, of course, a retelling of Cinderella, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard of this one, but if you haven't picked it up yet, I think it's a favorite for a reason. Ella is so spunky and intelligent and clever, and I love the kind of interconnecting fantasy worlds in all of Gail Carson Levine's books. When Ella is a baby, she is given the gift of obedience, and as most of us could probably imagine, that makes her life very difficult and complicated. So we follow her through some of the classic Cinderella situations, but with their own unique twist. Another Gail Carson Levine book is Fairest. This is a retelling of Snow White, and it takes place in the kingdom of Eortha, which is very singing and music focused. So we hear a little bit about that kingdom in Ella Enchanted, and we follow our main character Aza, who actually lives in that kingdom. So it's so cool to get to explore that world more. And although this book is, I think, not as much of a crowd pleaser as Ella Enchanted, at least I don't see it recommended as much as Ella Enchanted is, I really love it, and it really took me kind of the second or third time reading it to begin to appreciate it as much as Ella Enchanted, because Aza is just as strong as Ella in her own way, and I just really enjoyed the directions this story took. It was kind of unexpected. Next is Magnolia by Christy Cook. This is actually a Romeo and Juliet retelling set in the American South. It's sort of a reverse Romeo and Juliet story, actually, because their families, these two characters' respective families, would love for them to get together, but they hate each other. And then one day there is a storm and they begin to grow a lot closer to each other. Next is Wildwood Dancing by Juliet Marillier. This is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses with some other fairy tale or folklore elements as well, and it's actually set in Romania, so there is a lot of that kind of folklore. It's just such a beautifully written and atmospheric story. The sister relationships in this book are fantastic. This is definitely a fantasy or fairy tale book that just pulls you in and really envelops you in this world. Next, I have another Shakespeare retelling, or kind of retelling, and that is Still Star-Crossed by Melinda Taub. This is one of my all-time favorite books. I have mentioned it several times on this channel, and this is not exactly a Romeo and Juliet retelling. It retells the overarching story of the Montagues and the Capulets, because this takes place after the death of Romeo and Juliet, and we follow Benvolio and Rosaline, who are forced into this arranged marriage, and basically neither of them want this, so they decide to work together to solve a mystery that will enable them to not marry each other if they can solve it. I won't say any more than that about the main kind of plot, but I love this book so much. It's incredibly well written. I feel like it really captures the flavor of Shakespeare's language without feeling pretentious and without kind of bogging down the story. I definitely don't think you need to be a Shakespeare fan to read and enjoy this book. I also really love the mystery elements and the characters, and honestly, Benvolio and Rosaline they're like one of my top OTPs of all time. Like, I'm talking top 5. Next is Bryony and Roses by T. Kingfisher. This is a very short, actually, retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and it's one of the best done ones I think I've read. The writing, again, is very good. I feel like T. Kingfisher is so good at balancing humor and beautiful kind of passages and description, but it never feels too slow, and our main character, Bryony, is so much fun. She's so stubborn and intelligent, but not in an obnoxious way where she's just like putting herself in danger by arguing with people more powerful than her. That's a pet peeve of mine, if you can't tell. But I think the relationship between Bryony and the Beast character is so well done, which is obviously very important in a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. And I also think that the ending of this one is surprisingly creepy, so that was a really interesting element. So this is definitely, I think, a good kind of retelling for beginners, or, you know, for people who aren't used to reading them, because it is so short, it's so engaging, the characters are great, and it's got just a little bit of everything. Next is Shadow Spinner by Susan Fletcher. This is kind of a retelling of 1001 Nights, or the Princess Scheherazade story, but with a twist. We're actually following a servant girl named Marjani who is called in to help Scheherazade because Scheherazade is starting to run out of stories. There is a ton of other like politics and court intrigue and some really, really interesting discussion of loving people and what you can forgive in someone that you care about, and I just really enjoyed Marjani as a main character, and the focus on storytelling is so wonderful, and I just highly recommend this book if you want kind of a different take on the 1001 Nights story. Next is Furthermore by Tahara Mafi. This is actually a retelling of Alice in Wonderland. I think Tahara Mafi's whimsical writing style is so well suited to this kind of story. I really connected with Alice and with what she wanted, and I think that the entire world in this book, Furthermore, and kind of the other areas we see, is so vivid, so brilliant, and I really recommend this one if you can enjoy kind of a whimsical magical story that doesn't have everything explained and laid out for you. Like I mentioned in my wrap-up, if you have to have like Brandon Sanderson level magic systems, like you need to know exactly how everything works, this might drive you crazy, but otherwise I think you would love this book. Next, I have Princess of the Midnight Ball by Jessica Day George. This is a retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, and this is another one I think is really good for kind of beginners because it's not too heavy on any of the fairy tale elements. It's very accessible, and I don't mean that in a like derogatory way. I really enjoyed this book. I think the sister relationships, some of them were really, really well done. I thought that the adventure or like mystery aspects of the story were also good. There is a male main character who knits, and we need more of that. We just need more characters who knit in general, I think, but it was kind of especially refreshing to see a guy who does that. But I really enjoyed this one, and if you like this one, then I actually enjoyed the sequel even more, and this is Princess of Glass, and this follows a different sister, so it's kind of a companion sequel, and this is a retelling of Cinderella, and this is, I think, one of the cleverest and most unexpected twists on the Cinderella fairy tale. And I absolutely love Poppy, the main character. She's so funny and kick-ass and just everything. I really love her relationships with the other characters. I love kind of the slow unfolding of the Cinderella fairy tale, and you can't really tell from the beginning how it's going to go. So both of these books I highly recommend. And the last book in my more general category, I know there's a lot, is The Princess Curse by Mary Haskell. This is another all-time favorite book of mine. It is another retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, and this one is also set in kind of the Romania, Transylvania kind of area of Europe, but it's set in a fictional country, so there's a lot of kind of Romanian influences in the folklore, and I absolutely loved that aspect of it. I loved the world building, I loved the writing, I loved all of the characters, and there's just something about this book that it has like the perfect atmosphere for the story it's telling, if that makes any sense. So I highly recommend this one. It's a very quick read, but I wanted it to go on forever, just about. Okay, so now moving into my recommendations for the Queer or Gender Flipped Retelling Challenge. I think all of these in my stack are gender flipped. I don't think any of them are queer because I realized I have not actually read many queer fairy tale retellings or retellings of any kind. So I do have one on my TBR for sure, but I'm only recommending books that I have read myself. So that's why some of the ones that you might know of aren't on this list. So first off, I have Touch by Natalia Jaster, and this is kind of a retelling or reimagining of the Cupid or Eros story. So there is a personification of love, like the god of love, and it's actually a girl in this book, and she falls in love with a human boy, and complications and romance kind of ensue. This book is a new adult, or I would say it might be right on the border between YA and new adult, so just be aware of that going in. There is mature content in this book, so I would recommend this if you're looking for more of a romantic focused kind of retelling. Next I have Crimson Bound by Rosamund Hodge. This is another of my all-time favorite books that I have mentioned several times. This is a gender-flipped retelling of The Girl with No Hands, which is a fairy tale I don't think I had heard of before reading this book, and it's also a retelling kind of Little Red Riding Hood. And this is a very dark, strange, atmospheric story. It blends like this creepy forest atmosphere with 17th or 18th century France in a really beautiful and surprisingly well-developed way. This also could work for the dark fairy tale challenge because this is definitely an intense book. There are high stakes, and our main character Rochelle is definitely more of an anti-hero than she is a protagonist. She's done some terrible things and she's trying to come to terms with that, and I absolutely just love this book so much. I love the writing and the world building. Also, the romantic relationship in this book is another just all-time OTP that it still gets me just thinking about it now. Next is Of Beast and Beauty by Stacey J. This of course retells the Beauty and the Beast story, and it is sort of gender flipped in that kind of the whole point of this book is that it's not immediately obvious who is the beauty and who is the beast. And this is set in outer space. It doesn't quite feel like science fiction. I feel like this would be a great book for people who are used to reading either fantasy or sci-fi because it sort of feels right in the middle to me. And again, great writing, great characters, surprisingly like emotional and intense, and I love this book so much. Next is The Forbidden Wish by Jessica Corey. Let's say half gender-flipped version of Aladdin, because Aladdin is still a male character, but the genie is actually a female character, and her name is Zara, and she is wonderful. I know a lot of people really enjoyed the romantic relationship in this book. It didn't actually do that much for me, but everything else about the book was so good, including the ending I thought was just amazing, that I still really loved this book. And if you guys saw my discussion on like romantic relationships in books, you know that it's really, really rare for a book where I don't connect with the main relationship to be a favorite of mine, and this one is. Next I have Beastkeeper by Kat Hellison, and this is a gender-flipped version of Beauty and the Beast. Again, it's so gorgeously written. This is a book I actually didn't like very much the first time I read it, almost unhauled it, read it for the Rereadathon challenge, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars the second time. There's all these interweaving curses and these hard lessons that the characters have to learn about. Sometimes bad things happen and you can't undo them, but there's still this message of beauty and hope. And finally, my last bunch of books are for the challenge to read a fairy tale with a dark twist. So maybe you follow the villain as the protagonist, or it's an unhappily ever after kind of story. Just something about it is a dark take on a fairy tale or other kind of story. So first off, I have Princess of Thorns by Stacey J. Now this is actually not a retelling of Sleeping Beauty. I would say it's kind of a reimagining because we actually follow a character who is Sleeping Beauty's daughter, but it's definitely a dark retelling. The book opens with her mother killing herself in front of her children. So this book doesn't shy away from some really upsetting moments. This is such a strange kind of story, but I love the way that she brought in the like magical elements of this book. Aurora is just such an interesting character. Even when she makes decisions that you know are gonna be bad down the line, it's like you can't help rooting for her. And I really loved the development of her kind of alliance that turns into something more with the character Niklas, because I hated him when we first met him, but by the end of the book I really, really loved him. And also this book has a like girl has to dress as a boy in disguise kind of trope, and I actually still really enjoyed it, and I feel like that's a trope that can get overdone very easily. Next is A Face Like Glass by Frances Harding. Of course I had to have a Frances Harding book on this list. This is a dark reimagining of the Alice in Wonderland story, because it's sort of set up as if Alice had been born in Wonderland and she was trying to get out. The writing is so gorgeous and magical and just wraps you up in the story. I absolutely love the world that Neverfell lives in. She is the Alice in Wonderland character, and just the really powerful things this book has to say about classism and all of these other complicated issues that are done so well in this book. Next is 1,000 Nights by E.K. Johnston. This is another retelling of 1001 Nights, but it focuses very much on the power of women and on the power of storytelling. It doesn't reframe the Scheherazade story as a romance, and I really, really appreciated that. So I feel like this would be a great book if you really love that fairy tale, or if you love books that talk about storytelling, or maybe you read some other retellings of this story and you just felt like you wanted something kind of darker or more mysterious. I really enjoyed this one. Next is Hunted by Megan Spooner. This is a Beauty and the Beast retelling that is definitely in my top 3 or top 5. This is, again, so gorgeously written. I feel like I'm saying that for a lot of these, but it's true. You feel the winter atmosphere of this book. I really, really love our main character. I love the entire cast of characters, actually, even kind of the analog character to Gaston. This is just such a gorgeous story. It really incorporates Russian folklore elements and kind of elements of the Firebird story, and I love this book so much. I feel like it is so underhyped. Next is Cruel Beauty by Rosamund Hodge, and this is a dark fairy tale retelling of Beauty and the Beast, because the Beauty character is actually been training her whole life to kill the Beast character. And that's all I'm really gonna say, except that there are some unusual kind of Greek mythology elements in this book. It's hard to explain, but I know that that kind of mix and match of kind of world building can throw some people. I personally really enjoyed it. If you like kind of strange fantasy books, I think this might be one you enjoy as well. Next is Vasa in the Night by Sarah Porter, and this is a retelling of the Vasilisa the Beautiful fairy tale, and it's set in kind of an urban fantasy New York, and it's super creepy, super strange. This might be one of the most bizarre books on this list, if not the most bizarre, and even though it's not one of my favorite books, I think about it a lot, and I was so surprised by some of the directions the story took, and that's hard for a book to do for me, so this is another one that is just like, it's very strange, but if you've been tempted by the synopsis, I would give it a try, because even if you don't love it, I feel like you're going to be glad you read it. And finally, the last book on this very long list is Deathless by Catherynne M. Valente. This is a very dark retelling of the Koshi the Deathless story, and it's very heavily based in other Russian mythology and folklore as well. Catherynne M. Valente definitely did her research, and this book also incorporates a lot of Russian history. The writing in this is just incredibly good. The world building is masterful. Some of the characters are just, even the ones you don't like, you like, because you care about what happens to them, or they're so interesting that you sort of want to see them, even if you don't like them. So this is another one where it's like, if you are really wanting something dark and strange, and where not everything about it is explained to you, or you just want that old world kind of classic fairy tale atmosphere and darkness, this would be the book for you. Okay everybody, so those are my recommendations for retellings of fairy tales and other stories. I know there were so many, but I didn't really want to take any of them off the list because I do enjoy and recommend all of those, and I wanted to give you guys options. Please let me know if you guys have read any of these, what you thought, or if you're going to pick them up for the Retellathon. Thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!